Alright, so this is going to be a review of Chapter 6. So we're going to be doing elimination, substitution, graphing inequalities with some shading, and finding solutions. So for this first one, our first step is always going to be to see if x or y is by itself on one side of the equal sign. Well, they're not, so we're not going to use substitution. We're going to use elimination. So we're going to put them on top of each other. Okay, and then we're going to see if there are either x or y has the same number in front, but one's positive and one's negative, so that when we add them, they're going to cancel out. Well, it looks like negative x plus x will cancel, so 0. Y plus negative y, 0. Negative 2 plus 4, 2. Does 0 equal 2? No, it doesn't. So my answer is going to be no solution. Okay, determine which ordered pair represents a solution. So we are trying to see if there is going to be an ordered pair that's going to work in this situation. So let's try plugging in some numbers. Let's try a 0, 0 point first. So if we plug in 0, 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. Well, 0 isn't greater than 0, so that doesn't work. Let's try 1, 1. So negative 3 plus 2. Negative 1 isn't greater than 0, so that doesn't work. Let's try negative 1. 1. Okay, negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. Well, 5 is greater than 0, so that is a point that's going to be a solution because it works. Okay, first step, look to see if there is an x or y by itself on one side of the equal sign. Doesn't look like there is, so let's go ahead and put them on top of each other. Make sure our x's and y's are lined up. Check to see if there is the same number in front of either my x or y, but opposite, so one has to be positive, one has to be negative, because if you have like 3 and negative 3, if we add those, it's 0, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to eliminate. So it looks like our x's have 1's in front, and one's positive and one's negative, so we're going to add down. So y plus y is 2y. My x's cancel. 9 plus 11 is 20. Divide both sides by 2. Y is equal to 10. Okay, and then when you're trying to find out what the other point is, let's just plug it into one of the other equations. It doesn't matter which one. We've got to get x by itself this time. So we're going to subtract 10. X is equal to negative 1. So my answer is negative 1, 10. And if we plugged this point into both of these equations, it should be true. So you can check to make sure that you're 100% correct. Okay, determine which ordered pair represents a solution. Okay, so this one we got to plug in some more. So let's try 0, 0 again. Normally they would give you a bunch of different options and you could just plug in those points to see. So 0 is less than or greater to 2 times 0 is 0, minus 1 should be negative 1. That's not true. So we know that that one's not going to work. Let's try 0, 1. Let's try 1, 0. Okay, so 0 is less than or equal to 2 times 1 minus 1. 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 is 1. That is true, so this is a solution because when I plug it in, it's true, which means if I graph that, it's going to sit in my shaded region because any of the points that sit in my shaded region are going to be solutions. Okay. Looks like I don't have any x's or y's by themselves, so we're going to go ahead and put them on top of each other. Okay, it looks like if I cover up if I want to try to get my x's, the closest thing that's a common factor would be 20, so I'd have to multiply quite a bit. So let's check out my y's. Looks like all I have to do is multiply by a negative to get them to go away. Remember, one has to be positive, one has to be negative for it to work. So let's go ahead and multiply this bottom by -1. Okay, and it might help if you do your little rainbow thing so that you know it goes to everything. So -1 times 2y is -2y. -1 times 5x is -5x. -1 times -3 is 3. So now if we add down, our y's cancel. -4x plus -5x is -9x. -3 plus 3 is 0. Divide both sides by -9. X is equal to 0. Now we got to figure out what our y is, so let's go ahead and plug it into this. 5 times 0 is 0. Got to divide both sides by 2 to get y by itself, so my y should equal -3/2, or -1.5 would work. Okay, determine an ordered pair that represents a solution. Okay, so I said a solution is something that sits in my shaded region. So I could pick any of these points here because they all sit in my shaded region. So let's do 0, 3 would work. -1, 3 would work. And since these are solid lines, anything on any point on those lines would work too, because if I plug them in, it would either be less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So they can be equal to. So 0, 2 would work. -2, 2 would work. So just make sure that it's somewhere in the shaded region or on a solid line. Okay, the substitution method should be used to solve which system of equations? Substitution, we have to have either x by itself or y by itself on one side of the equal sign, because then we can replace it. We can substitute it in for another equation. And you can also check to see, well, a lot of these look similar. My x is on top of my x's, y is on top of my y's. So this one is the only one that has x by itself. So that's the one that I would pick. Okay, the substitution method should be used to solve which of the following equations. So again, we're going to be looking to see if there's an x or y by itself on one side of the equal sign. Well, it looks like this has a y by itself, this has a y by itself, and so does this. But this one right here is the only one that has y completely by itself. So that's going to be my answer, because it's going to be the easiest one for us to solve. Okay, Zoo Store sells giraffe pencils for 32 cents and giraffe stuffed animals for $7.60. During 1 hour, the clerk rang up $171.04 for 34 pencils and giraffes. How many pencils did the clerk sell? Okay, so we want to do money with money. So money, money, money. Okay, so we'll say this is X and this one's Y. Okay, so to see how many pencils they sold, I can multiply X times 32 cents because that will tell me if I have 4 pencils, if I multiply it by 32 cents, that's how much they spent on the 4 pencils. So let's do 0.32X plus 760Y, and they spent a total of $171.04. Okay, so now during the 1 hour, the clerk rang up 34 pencils and giraffes. So a total of my pencils and giraffes should be 34. Okay, now we're going to have to solve it. So we can do, since my x is on top of my x's, y is on top of my y's, we can do elimination and multiply by negative 0.32. So then I'm going to erase this. Okay, so when I distributed the negative 0.32, I distributed it to everything, and I should get this. So my x's will finally cancel. 760 minus 0.32 should give me 728y. And then 171.04 plus negative 1088 should give me 160.16. Okay, and then we got to divide both sides by 728. So my y should then be 22. Okay, and I was trying to find out how many pencils did the clerk sell? Well, we figured out how many stuffed animals they sold, so now we got to figure out how many pencils they sold. Okay, so my original equations was x plus y equals 34. So let's go ahead and plug my y in. So it'd be x plus 22 equals 34. Subtract 22 from both sides. So my x should be 12 pencils. So there is my answer. Okay. Determine which ordered pair represents a solution of the system of equalities in the graph. So we need to figure out what of those points sits in that shaded region right there. So negative 3, 0. So negative 3, 0. Our points are always x, y. So we're going to go over x, 1, 2, 3, and then it's negative 3, 0. So that one doesn't work. 0, 3. We start 0. Then we got to go up 3 on our y. 1, 2, 3. Doesn't work. 0, negative 3. So we start at 0, and then we go to negative 3 down my y. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that one should work right there because it sits in my shaded region. When solving a system of equations, which expression can be substituted for y in the first equation? So we're trying to substitute something for y in this equation. If I had y equals 1, I could plug 1 in for y. If I had y equals 2, I could plug 2 in for y into that equation. So what we're going to try to do is get y by itself in this equation because we're trying to substitute it into the first one. So to get y by itself, we got to add 27x because we got to get rid of everything not attached to y. So we're going to get 27x plus 9. Got to get both sides by 3. So y should equal 9x plus 3. So that is my answer because I can substitute that in for y because this means 9x plus 3 means the exact same thing as y. So if it's asking to substitute for y in the first equation, you have to get it to be y equals. If it's asking for you to substitute x into the first equation, you got to get the second equation to be x equals. Okay, so now we got to figure out which of these graphs are going to be true for the picture. So let's take a look at this line first. Okay, so we know it starts at 0, 0, so it's going to be the second equation here that we have going. Okay, so then it looks like if you plug in 1, 1, it should be true because that's where it's shaded at. So let's put this in up here. So since we notice 1, 1 is shaded for that one, we know that it has to be true if I plug it in. So let's try it. We're trying this first A here. Is 1 greater than negative 2? Well, yeah, it is. So we have to make sure that we keep this sign because it has to be true. That is the only one that's going to be true for that second part. Okay, so now let's look at the other line. This line. Okay, so it looks like it's down at negative 2, so we're looking at these ones here. So now we got to figure out which one it is. So it looks like if we plug in 1, 1, it again should be true. So let's take that top one. So this is the same thing as this one. Plugging in 1, 1 because it needs to be true. So 2 minus 2 is 0, so it looks like that one's true. So it looks like the correct answer then is A. So you just got to see which side it's shaded on and see which point should be true when you plug them in. It's a little bit tricky, but it works. Okay, determine which ordered pair represents a solution. Okay, so let's try negative 1, 3. Just a random point that I picked up off the top of my head. Again, normally on the test, you'll have A, B, C, and D, and you could plug in all of those and see which ones are true. So let's plug it in. So 3, 2 times negative 1 plus 3. So 3 is greater than. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. So it looks like that's true. So that is a solution to my equation. Okay, which ordered pair represents the solution to the system of equations graphed below? Well, this is like kind of what we did in the first lesson where we graphed and we saw how many times they touched and where they touched at. Since there is no shading on this one, you got to figure out where they're connecting. So here's where they're connecting. So since my points are always written x, y, let's see how many x we go over. 1, 2, 3. And how many y we go down. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that should be my answer. Okay, the first equation is multiplied by negative 3. To eliminate the variable x in the system of equations, multiply the second equation by what number? So if we multiply this by negative 3, if we distributed it, we would get negative 6x plus 18y is equal to negative 42. Well, that's a 42. Okay, and then we still have our 3x plus 17y is equal to negative 34. Okay, so we're trying to eliminate the variable x. What do we have to multiply by to eliminate that variable x? Well, they have to have the same number in front, so it looks like we can get them both to be 6's. One has to be positive, one has to be negative for them to cancel. They need to eliminate. So it looks like we can multiply it by 2. And that will give me a negative 6x on top and a positive 6x on bottom. Okay, y equals 2x and 2x plus 5y equals 12. First step, look to see if there's an x or y by itself on one side of the equation. We have a y by itself. So we can plug this in. Because y equals 2x, 2x means the same thing as y. So let's take that and plug it in for y, because they mean the exact same thing. So I just took it and replaced my y. Remember, always put it in parentheses. So then we get 2x plus 10x is equal to 12. 2x plus 10x is 12x. Divide both sides by 12. X is equal to 1. Now to figure out what our y is, we can plug it back into either equation. This one looks a little bit easier, so I'm going to plug it into that one. 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, so my answer is 1, 2. Okay, this one, to get n by itself, you have to multiply both sides by 2. Because if this is 2 over 1, that means our 2's are going to cancel. You have to do whatever is the opposite. Since we're dividing, we need to multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. So negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. Our sign does not flip because that 2 is not negative. If we're multiplying or dividing by a negative 2, then the sign would have flipped. But otherwise, it's going to stay like this. So this is my answer. Okay, which ordered pair represents the graph below? We've already done that one. So Maggie has a business saving starfish. She earned $16 less this week than she did the last week. She earned a total of $322 during the 2 weeks. How many dollars did she earn this week? Okay, so during the 2 weeks, she earned $322. So if we do x plus y is equal to 322, because she totaled out to be 322 for the 2 weeks. So we'll say x is week 1 and y is week 2. Okay, Maggie has a business saving starfish. She earned $16 less this week than she did last week. So if we take x and she earned $16 less this week, since we're week 2, if we take 16 minus x, we should get our week 2. Because she earned $16 less than she did the previous week. Okay, so now it looks like our y's by itself. Let's go ahead and substitute it in for y. So you got x plus x minus 16 is equal to 322. 2x minus 16 is equal to 322, because x plus x is 2x. 322 plus 16, we got to add 16 to both sides. So 2x is equal to 338. Divide by 2. Okay, x is equal to $169. Okay, so how much did she earn this week? So since we were talking about 2 weeks, we want to know what she earned the second week. We just figured out what she earned the first week. Okay, so let's take 169 plus y is equal to 322 to figure out how much she earned in the second week. So we'd subtract 169 from both sides and get 153. Well, that is $16 less than the first week, so that's true. So that is my answer, the y equals. And make sure you label it. Label it if it's money. Okay. Got to figure out which line is true. All right, so it looks like it's a solid line, so we can go ahead and eliminate B and D, because if it doesn't have a little line underneath it, so we know that those two are dashed. Okay, let's pick a point that we know is true. How about 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0, negative 6 should be true if I plug it into either one of the equations. So my y is 0, negative 6. Okay, so negative 6, 0 minus 5 is negative 5. Is negative 6 less than or equal to negative 5? Well, it is less than, so that one is true. So A is my answer. Okay, determine which ordered pair represents a solution. And we've done that one. Okay, here we go. So we know it's a dashed line this time, so we can eliminate C and D because they have the lines underneath them. So it looks like 0, 0 should be true for whichever one I plug it in. So let's take our first one. Let's take A and plug in 0, 0. So 0 is greater than negative 1/2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. 0 is greater than negative 2, so it looks like A is our answer. Okay, to get y by itself, since we're dividing, we know we got to multiply. You got to do the opposite. So we multiply both sides by negative 2. So 1 times negative 2 should give me negative 2. But since I multiplied by a negative, you have to flip the inequality. Flip the inequality if you multiply or divide both sides by negative. So here's my answer. Determine an ordered pair that represents a solution. So we have to get an ordered pair that's in here. And we can also pick one on a solid line, but not a dashed line. So we could pick one on that solid line if we wanted to. But I'm going to pick an easy one. Let's do 1, 1. So that's right there. That one works. How about 0, 1? That's right there. That one works. So as long as you pick anything that's in this area or on this solid line, you're good. Okay. So it looks like they're both dashed, so we can eliminate A and D. Now let's take a look at this line first. So it looks like it starts at negative 2, so that's this top line. And it looks like, let's pick a point that we know is true. How about 0, 1, 2, negative 3, 0, right there. Okay, let's plug it into this first equation and see if it works. Okay, make sure you put it in parentheses, otherwise you're not going to get the negatives to make a positive. So 0 is less than, negative times negative is a positive. 0 is less than 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay, so we know that's true. Well, it looks like they both have the same top equation, so now we got to check this bottom equation. Negative 3, 0 we can plug back in. So 0 is less than 3 times negative 3 minus 1. 3 times negative 3, negative 9. Negative 9 minus 1 is negative 10. Well, that's not true, so we know that C is going to be true because the inequalities flip the other way.